Welcome to today's episode of the E.N.G Media Podcast. We have two very exciting guests, Josh and Nikkei with Solutions Afoot. For those of you just joining the podcast, I'm Christian Gannon, the co-founder of E.N.G Media, and we specialize in helping software and tech companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your software tech business to the next level, make sure to stick around. So let's get right into it. I understand that Solutions Afoot helps businesses optimize operations by creating custom database solutions and seamless API integrations. As Caspio's only premier gold partner, your team of Caspio certified developers builds secure, scalable solutions tailored to each business. From automating workflows to simplifying data management, Solutions Afoot transforms complex processes into efficient, growth-focused solutions. Can you both share more about the business and your roles within it?
Nikkei, why don't you go first?
I'm, among other things, the business development officer. Um, Here at Solutions Afoot, my job is to build relationships.
Awesome. And Josh?
So I'm the CEO and founder of Solutions Foot and basically built the business on relationships. Um, Instead of trying to get VC money, I um, found partners that um, who believed in my vision and wanted to be part of the company, like Nikkei, and and basically started the business in 2017. The partnership began in 2021, and we're 4 years running strong and growing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And from your perspective for either of you, what major trends are you seeing right now in the enterprise software space?
That's you, Josh.
So HIPAA compliant um, applications are always popular. We've been doing a lot of manufacturing recently. We've done education in the past, and professional services is kind of a old-fashioned bread and butter for us.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. And right now, in this kind of landscape that you mentioned, what's making it more challenging or on the flip side, easier to operate in?
Well, so I'm gonna give Nikkei some kudos right now. Nikkei has made it easier for the company because he's building this great system, and he loves systems, by the way. And make him smile. See, there's the smile. Um, and with the system, things run from start of the relationship to the full build, and maybe going back to Nikkei for upselling another project down the line. The system makes it possible and gives everyone visibility of what's going on and streamlines our process.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's very interesting. And so, Nikkei, you partnered with Josh in 2021 then, correct? And so you do kind of the development side and the upselling as he's kind of talking about, correct?
Yeah, we've known each other for some years in my other company from another capacity, and we just interacted through Chamber of Commerce, relationship building, like you do on traditional platforms like LinkedIn. It was old fashioned, walking around the city, which I encourage tech professionals to do that outside of doing pitch decks inside of offices or in this type of environment. So yeah, once we walked a couple times, probably more times than Josh would have liked to at the time. Now he's a lot
Hey, we're still
smaller and much better shape, and now we're walking a lot more. So for both of us, walking works well. So yeah, I've been carried along to help out with the development side.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I did see on your LinkedIn, Nikkei, that you have walking meetings. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that was something that was foreign to me and maybe is something foreign to a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, Josh and I pretty much depending on how our day goes. If we don't have a leadership meeting, we don't do leadership meetings because there's too many of us to try to get the entire crowd to go walking. But it's a really good non-threatening environment where you just find a professional. You don't find them. You sort of have a mutual idea of what you do. Pick a location that is comfortable for each person. Sometimes that could be the park, walking around the city, and you walk, but it's an organic meeting, kind of like this. We don't really go from an agenda. We just try to find out what are you working on, what are some challenges, and then that's kind of where Josh and I started the relationship as partners, was really finding out what struggles he had. he had struggles because he's a developer, but he also had to he had to work on the other side. So he had to take the customer through the complete journey by himself. And when you're trying to scale, that's very challenging. So bringing me
Of
on to
course.
handle one side of relationship building by walking. Sometimes I've walked in Silicon Valley. I've walked in rural North Carolina. I've walked at the beach, and you'd be surprised by how many tech CEOs would say, "Sure." As a matter of fact, I have a walking meeting with a former medical CEO or a VP tomorrow. And it's just walk at a pace that's comfortable, and you just kind of decide how the gray matter works and keep it moving.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I think something that a lot of people might miss too is in walks that it's been proven that your blood's obviously flowing, right? And it's easier to come up with ideas. It's easier to have a natural conversation. So I'm really glad that that's something you shared. And I think that a lot of our viewers will find that interesting as well. And kind of moving on, what, in your opinion, either of you, what does the current competitive landscape look like for Solutions Afoot right now? Is there a lot of competitors doing what you do? I know you're the only one that's Premier Gold certified with Caspio, but is there anything that differentiates you within the rest of the market, I guess?
Josh, if you want to attack that, or you want
You
me
go
to,
ahead.
I mean, we are not although we are soon to change, hopefully,
Hmm.
our category is going to move. And that's sort of we're working on it. Um,
Okay.
and one of the things that, because of the way we work, Caspio is a ginormous platform which builds apps, web apps around the world. I mean, they're an international firm. Our company model specifically decided not to go global and keep all of our professionals within the contiguous North America. So if we don't like offshore and nearshore, and there's some great providers within the Caspio space who are offshore and nearshore. But we find that, coming back to what I was saying about the walking, it's very difficult to meet a CEO if you're abroad 12 hours or whatever hours. But we've been known to, Josh and I have been known to grab a stakeholder and say, "Hey, what are you doing? We're coming through. Do you mind if we stop by?" And that really builds a genuine connection, because not only we're talking to the CEO, we're talking to the rank and file folks. And I come from an army
Hmm.
background, so I'm talking to the generals and I'm talking to the privates. And Josh talks to the generals and talks to the privates. So you learn that the general may want some and have orders, and that's the CEO, VP, or senior manager. But then there are people who actually have to do the work, who think the idea sucks that the CEO has. And by us kind of being a conduit between them, I said, well, maybe we need to look at it, and it's about systems. It's about understanding systems and how they all operate. So our unique advantage is that we're North American based. We will visit our customers if it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate, at their location, and really talk to as many people. And most companies give us free range to talk to everybody, because we have a very good trust factor with them. We don't spread. We don't, whatever's their IP, we keep it inside their stuff. That's not our business. And so they trust us. So we'll go through and see what are glitches in your system that we can help you to solve, so that if there's a bottleneck and we attach a data set onto it, how do we free you up so that you can grow, expand, and not have to deal with some of these day-to-day redundant processes that can be automated.
Picking back off that a little bit, you can't build software for a company unless you know how their company runs. So what we do is we get to, one, we get to know them personally. Two, we find out from A to Z how the flow works of their daily workday. If you can't figure that out, how are you going to build software for them?
Of
You know,
course.
because your company might run differently than our company. You can't build a cookie cutter software that work for both of us.
Of course, of course. And I think that's a big shift that's happening not only in the tech space, but in any partnering businesses, especially with us, is that taking a holistic approach, right? Like that you guys are talking about, really understanding the pain points, really understanding that every business is a little bit different. And not even just on the software side, but maybe on the sales side, maybe on the marketing side. Every department operates a little bit differently within each company, and taking a holistic approach, like how can I help you the best if it makes sense, right? And if it doesn't make sense, then we probably shouldn't work together, right? And I think having that attitude instead of a cookie cutter approach, like this is our solution and this is the only thing we can implement, is really important, right? So thank you for sharing that.
And then we do everything based on our core values.
Mm-hmm.
So our core values are integrity, transparency, communication, and responsiveness. If we can't achieve those four, then we're not doing that customer any good.
Right, right. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's huge to have something to come back to know, okay, are we doing things the right way or are we a little bit off base with our center line, right?
Yeah.
I
And
want to borrow what Josh said on that communication process, and this is sort of something I've seen in the tech build, especially the custom space, is that the response for a problem is, you know, an hour a day. So if we're looking at a competitor, a competitive shop who offshore something, I'm not knocking them, but it's just a
Mhm.
reality.
Of
Sometimes their
course.
responsiveness is hours, and usually we're if it's something that we can solve, I mean, we're on the phone in 20 minutes like that. So that if it's
Wow.
something that's glitchy, that they don't have to wait. It's like send somebody a support ticket. Let's get on the phone. If it's, I mean, can it be delayed until later? Yes, because it's not an emergency. But if it's
Mhm.
something serious, and the customer says, okay, something went weird south or in the order, that happened recently. We were like in a conference in 15 minutes. So to be
That's
able to
awesome.
address that customer, so that responsiveness is serious. We take that really serious, and we've seen competitors who may not respond for 12 hours, and I'm like, that
Wow.
12,
business cannot
12
survive.
hours.
Huh?
Some of the offshore take 2 weeks to respond back.
Exactly. I mean,
Wow.
and that's, I mean, you take that long. No, it might take a while to solve the problem. I get that. But you
Of
can't wait,
course.
that long to respond to a critical process in a healthcare organization, an education process, a manufacturing facility. I mean, seriously, I mean, they're dead in the water sometimes. So you really got to be on top of it because if we're the bottleneck, I mean, they may have other problems with this, that's organic to their organization, but something
Mhm.
we've touched or something we've built, we want to make sure that if there are updates, somebody clicks something, the software is like a person. You hit the wrong button, it gets all weird. So we want to go. It is what it is. I mean, it's not ever perfect. It's always
Mhm.
organic, which is why there's updates. So um, it's not static, rather it's organic. It keeps moving.
Mhm.
So within that understanding, we need to know that there's an update, something popped up, something happened, somebody in something not that we didn't do, but the customer may have done, and they started deleting stuff that they weren't supposed to, and so we got to go back and get on it and solve it.
Of
Yeah,
course.
that was my week last week.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think that's awesome. I think that's a big point you made, not to knock competitors that may be outsourcing overseas or outside of the country, but a responsive time is a huge part in tech. And because, especially when your organization runs on that software, right? If something breaks, if not that it's going to get fixed in 5 minutes, that's not what we're saying, but to respond to it and understand, okay, we need to address the problem. How do we address the problem? Come up with a fix before, like you're saying, a competitor might not even respond before the fix was implemented, right? So, and that's a huge point. And kind of shifting a little bit, as we're in kind of the marketing space, we'd like to know what's it like building and kind of retaining a marketing team if you guys have one, and especially with the current competitive landscape for talent.
I guess from our standpoint, since we're a bespoke shop, we're very unique in that respect. I mean, we're not a big shop. There are some competitors, and they're fantastic, but they have a full-on army of marketing folks and stuff like that. We've been smart enough to be able to keep that relatively smart by doing again
Mhm.
systems and tools in place to be able to develop that and cohesively keep keep our brand out there, but also be able to respond if somebody, like for example, if somebody responds on LinkedIn, I'm usually the one or Josh or somebody else in our team will respond if it's appropriate for that person or it needs to be shifted to someone else. But marketing can be complex if the larger you get, but fortunately we are still an infant relative to some of the larger design shops. I mean, if we were comparing ourselves to like a Microsoft, and
Mhm.
and granted they're not, they are software developers at their core, but they build products, but their marketing budget is astronomical, I suspect. But our
Of
shop,
course.
not so much, not so much.
That makes a lot of sense. And you kind of talked about tools. I know a big thing in the space, and I've talked to a lot of people in Nine Network. A lot of people are shifting to use agentic tools to help them throughout the day. So agentic AI, such as Fireflies, like that records meeting notes and things like that. Are there any that you guys use on a daily basis or weekly basis that are really
Well,
helpful for
I
you right
mean,
now?
Firefly, obviously, those
Of
are
course.
useful, or any one of those recording and note taking. Because if you're, I mean, the old way, oftentimes, especially if you were doing like a Zoom or something like that, and even
Hmm.
now, Google has implemented their auto. They didn't have it before, but now they pop up with a reader and a recapper and summarization and everything like that, which was smart because people were like incorporating Fireflies. But if you already have it on Google, you just pop it in already.
Hmm.
Um, we find those very useful tools, especially when we need to recap, especially if it goes on for an hour conversation. You're not going to retain everything, so you get those kind of tools within the space are very useful for us, especially on the initial, because sometimes people tell you things on the initial conversation, but it's not necessarily related to what they're talking about, and so you got to kind of sometimes you got to say, okay, is that really important? No, it's not really relative to what we're going
Right.
to build, but it's important to understand the culture, and that's where some of those tools really do help out.
That's awesome. That's often awesome. And so shifting a little bit, can you tell me what each of you, I know you said at the beginning what you're responsible for, but like how your day kind of unwinds. What does it kind of look like? What are you focused on, Josh? What are you focused on, DK? That really makes it hand in hand, like your partners, right? To make the business continue to run and churn.
Oh, so I mean, we're partners of a larger team because there's more than Josh and
Mhm.
I in the organization. And each person has a relative. But for me, it's really nurturing when folks reach out to us either on LinkedIn, some of our marketing strategies to be able to say, I have a problem. Some of the partnerships we have with Caspio, if there's a problem within a larger, more complex type of something that
Mhm.
needs a people who've done Caspio for a really, really long time, like Josh and some of our team, have done this platform for so long that they've been around probably longer than Caspio's platform current in-house professional team. So with that,
Wow.
it's really
I'm
taking,
old.
yeah, he's been around for a minute. Um, and I'm younger, but that's only in my mind because I'm actually technically older than Josh. But in my space is really integrating with all of our systems. How did that person come into our, and then taking them through the journey? Is it a journey that I have a problem, but my budget is super, super small? And then we have to think, okay, can we help this client? Is this within our ICP? And if they're not, who within our ecosystem that this is not an ideal customer because they have a lot of vision, but their budget is so narrow. And if you and you can appreciate this in the custom space when you once you throw the word custom, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be like super expensive, but it ain't cheap,
Right.
and
Definitely.
but it's not as expensive as you might think. And if we were looking comparing somewhere we do it, I mean, we are often 25% less than some of the folks that do it in full stack mode. So
Gotcha.
that's why we stay within the Caspio, because we can do more, we can deploy faster, and we can, I mean, we have the security and all that other stuff that comes along with that, but we have relationships within the higher levels within that platform. That if we say we need a little something here or something there, then the conversation is sort of a mutually beneficial environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Of
And
course.
my daily varies. Um, Foremost, I am concerned about vision and growth. That's job of the CEO. But you know, also do marketing. I read solicitations from 9 different states that
Mhm.
for local municipality and state work. Um, Payroll, you know, invoicing. You know,
The boring stuff.
Thanks.
But no, But and I'm not saying it as an insult. It's a compliment because if you don't do all this, then you have to make sure you're in compliance. You're in legal compliance. You're in accounting compliance. You pay people. You got to make sure if you're working in different states or different organizations, each state has their own payment process. That's what keeps a business going. It's not all these exciting new bells and whistles. It's the
Mhm.
boring stuff that if you're in an entrepreneurial space that you don't think about, but that's what keeps the lights on. It's the boring stuff. It's not the all exciting, new this, new that AI, that's not what keeps a business going. It's the boring stuff, and Josh is brilliant at doing it.
Yeah, brilliant's a stretch, but
Yeah, I'm trying here,
yeah.
work with me.
Um, Other thing I do is I keep an eye on up and coming developers.
Mhm.
Um, we like to find developers who are a piece of clay, and we train them with our best practices. And we don't like them coming from other companies because you might learn, bad habits and stuff like that. And we also want to develop in uniformity. So you do it this way. Don't take a shortcut. Because if someone has to take over for you, if you go on vacation and you take a shortcut, they they have no idea, right?
Right.
So, and then the other thing we do differently, just to give you a difference between us and others, we invite you into our project management software. You have total visibility of every task in the project. It gives you time it took to do the task. So there's no wondering what is going on. Total transparency with the development company is unheard of.
Of course, of course. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think the transparency is important, right? I think that's what builds trust and builds your authority in the industry overall, right?
Yeah.
Looks at you as one of the top partners or the top people to work with. And I think, like you said, going back to those four things that are really important to you, like the moral side of it, like having the transparency along with the morals is what is contributes to your success overall, right? So,
Can I make another comment within that, which I've seen a trend, and it's a trend that's been going on but it's I come from an integrity background, and Josh alluded to that, and what I call in other develop, and we've seen it, and we're like, oh my god, did they really do it? It's time stacking.
mhm,
Time stacking is the idea that if you say my per fee hour is this, I'm going to stack it with all kinds of nonsense to elongate the time so that the
right,
project balloons. So rather than being something that can be solved in 20 minutes, it's a 3 hour project just to do something that takes 20 minutes. And we're like, no, we're not going to waste a customer's money, and we're not going to time stack, and that's what Josh said about letting the customer so they can see exactly what we're doing and they know how many hours it took, and they can it's like, okay, but we've seen development shops who will quote like this, oh, it's our per hour is very very inexpensive, but you time stack everything, and before you know it, you are three times more than say us, and we can deliver faster because we're like, it takes 20 minutes, that's all we need. We don't need 3 hours to do the same job.
Yeah.
right, right. And I think especially, I think I'm glad you mentioned that as well. I think in smaller businesses and startups, right, every dollar counts and that can make or break your year as a business, right? And if you're working with companies that maybe are time stacking and really charging you more and maybe you don't have a full understanding of that tech side, it can really hurt your P&L at the end of the year.
It
And
does, and you don't notice it because you're thinking. I mean, it would be the equivalent of me going to McDonald's and they say, well, my McDonald's is $1, but if it costs you $100 when you stack all the
right,
time on top of it, is it really $1? Or you're
right,
paying more.
right.
So
So
it's just analogous to that. You just keep stacking really inefficient projects onto it so it could be elongated so that you can balloon the project so that the customer thinks they're saving, but in fact, they're getting time stacked.
yeah.
And
Got
it's
So
a
it.
without
pet
naming
peeve for me. I hate it. It just bugs me when I see people do it.
without naming names, we're taking over a project from another developer,
Mhm.
and they charge 250 hours of development time, and they develop 7 pages of an app. Very
250 hours.
That is
seven.
a very good example of time stacking. You balloon the
Right.
project out, but you only deliver, and it's like, oh, you're doing it. but because we've been in this industry a while, we know how much time it takes to do a job. I mean, if somebody was to
Hmm.
ask you how much time does it take to change a tire, we would know that if that's what we did every day. But if you came to somebody who didn't know, changing a tire, it takes an hour and a half. Like, man, I can change a tire in 15 minutes. You know?
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you guys for sharing. I think that's something that's super important and really relative to your industry, right? And kind of piggybacking off that and shifting a little bit, when it comes to measuring success at Solutions Afoot, what financial or performance metrics matter the most to your business? Is it client acquisition, project delivery time, profitability, or maybe something else entirely?
I'll take this.
Yes,
So
that's way
what
on your side.
what what's most important for us is not necessarily monetary value, although we like making money, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But ultimately, and it's going to sound cheesy, customer satisfaction.
Okay.
If we can't create an application that works for our client, we do not do our job.
I think that's the most important. I think bare bones, right? That's the most important thing for a lot of companies, and I don't think they focus on it enough, in all honesty, right? It's how do we get the next person, the next sale, the next person in. But if your current customers aren't happy, then it doesn't matter if you get another sale because they're going to go end up going to
Yeah.
your competitor anyway. So,
So
Josh, I was going to add in just a little to that, just because I like analogous stories. So if you look at a car dealer, which has a bad reputation, and I know a car dealer, and I mean like
mhm,
used car dealers they have a history of interesting background. But if you go to a used car dealer in that industry and they treat you well, they treat your friends well, you go there and they're going to make profit. Of course, that's their job. But within
mhm.
reason, they're going to keep treating you. And if something goes wrong and they come back and they fix it, you're going to build trust in that. And that's sort of what Josh has kind of alluded to is that if we do our job, there's a really good chance that they're either going to come back for a bigger project or even more project without us even asking, or they're going to refer us to another project that not often is a competitor. They'll somewhere else. And that's what we like. And that's what I'm talking where I have to keep that relationship going and build that trust is keeping them happy because happy customers, bring happy money.
yeah,
Of course.
we have very little turnover with our clients. We've had clients that we've been doing development for 4 years. We started off doing like a little project, and now you know, we're building them, every couple of weeks and ongoing, and they once they build the trust with us, they stay with us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And looking ahead for the next 12 months, what are kind of the goals, or is there maybe a target that if you hit, you'd be really happy with? And maybe it's different for each of you based on your different efforts.
Just to grow is my goal, right? How much, how fast? Um, Nikkei worries about that.
Of
Mm.
course.
But my goal is just to grow as organically as possible. Um, and now that we have the systems, we should be able to maintain that better.
Definitely.
And I think that's and now that Josh alluded to that part, I think that's important because if you're building an operation and you don't I like to lean on the military. The military is a system generated organization. How they efficiently, sends weapons downrange, do a job. Everything in the military has a task, an origin, and there's a way to do it. So that when you're training the new recruit, they know how to do it the same as someone who's been in the military for 10, 20 years. So it's done the same way. What that does is that takes it's almost a McDonald's kind of thing. You take it down to a level where your lowest recruit can understand it. And so I believe systems do that and they allow an organization to grow organically without running into headaches down the road. Because if you have something great and it's fantastic and it grows too fast, and a lot of firms that we've seen, take on some funding, and that gets them in trouble because they grew faster than they were really supposed to. They didn't learn some of those fundamental things about, cash flow, personnel, taxes, regulations, and compliance. And then when you start getting to the government space, I mean, it's a whole bunch of regulations you probably didn't anticipate. So it's building those systems and using those systems and training your organization to think, how do we do it? Okay, our system. We have a system for that. So it's, people say, well, we got an app for that. Right?
So,
But
so,
there's a system for that.
so one of the things that I take pride in is, and we can end it on this, that we raised the company with our own money. We didn't take any VC money. You know, you know, we didn't want the risk. We didn't want any of that. If we couldn't afford something in the beginning, we didn't do it. You know, it's only now that we have a marketing budget and ability to build a system, but we didn't do it right away because we didn't want to go upside down.
Right, of course, of course. And I know that we're a little bit strengthened on time, but I have one more question. It's a fun one, but a tough one, but I always like to close out with this. If you had a magic wand and could solve just one problem within your business, what would that be?
So sometimes, and fault of no one, right? Since we're basically a high ticket item, there's a it gets a little bottlenecked sometimes. With the getting to the final sale. It's not like we're doing a $25 app. Sometimes people are paying thousands of dollars over time to use our services. You know, they don't make that decision quickly,
Of course.
and they shouldn't. So if I had a magic wand, I would have them make decisions quicker, but it's never going to happen. So
Of course, of course. And Ike, do you have any on your end?
I think I'll echo what Josh said. If you can shorten that time period, and that happens, it's really about trust and building that. But when you're building systems where people are going to have to put money in the game, or I mean, the other side of it is, um, and I'll back off from that because I'll say this: if I had a magic wand, I would wish there were less dishonest people in the software build space. It's
Of course, of course.
um
good luck there.
yeah, because we end up inheriting the pain and the frustration. So when we take over a project, that leader has already been burned. They give us the litany, and that's what I was talking about, Fireflies. They give us the litany of what they were, and some of them are very animated, and
Of course.
I'm toning it down, and they're so mad when they come to us, and so we have to listen to them because they want to vent, and we have to reassure them, and because they're very unsure because they've sent a lot of money downrange and they don't have anything to take to market, and so we have to get them down. So my magic wand was I wish there was less dishonest people in the software build space. Unfortunately, there are a lot of shady characters.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. And we totally understand that on our side. Even within our own business, there's a lot of lead gen agencies out there, and they really put a bad taste in a lot of business owners' mouths because they promise something that they can't deliver on. And so I totally understand that. And I'm glad that that's your answer because that's a super insightful answer. But if people want to connect with you or learn more about what Solutions Afoot is doing, where could they go and how could they connect?
You
Okay.
go to solutionsafoot.com if you want to meet with me to have just a organic conversation like we're having. I like organic conversations because if I have a predetermined question, then I'm sort of stacking it, sort of stacking the deck and leading them down the way. But if they have an initial conversation, it's solutionsafoot.com/consultation. It sounds more formal, but it's just like this. We just talk, find out what your problems are, see if it makes sense for us to move to the next step. And if it does, we'll move to the next step. If it doesn't, maybe you're not ready for it just yet.
Perfect, perfect. I will leave the link to the Solutions Afoot website in the description of this video. I highly recommend you check it out, even if you're not interested in having a consultation. But I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that they're doing, and there's a lot of stuff that I learned on the website if you're even interested in the space at all. But other than that, thank you again, Josh and DK, for your time and insights today, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast.